So welcome friends, so we are back with a brand new movie on What If Naruto Was Gargoyle of the Leaf, Naruto X Hidden Bloodline movie. But before we start, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Now let's begin the story. In the scroll safe behind the image of one of the 5 Hokage in the Hokage's office, one scroll rolled forward, as though it was being pushed by an unseen force, and landed against the door. It unrolled slightly so that the first 3 paragraphs. Long before the age of the Raikodu Sennin, there was a time of brutality with man to the west of the shinobi nations. Before the threat of the Biju, there were beings that guarded those who they deemed worthy. They acted without sacrifice and spoke as though they themselves were men. They were cursed, however. They were never granted the light of sun on their skin, only to bask in that of the moon. By day they were stones, by night they were warriors. These are the beings known as gargoyles. Some may ask how I know this. Well, as most can say, I look different from those born naturally in the shinobi lands. Blonde unruly hair, blue eyes, unnatural hunger, immense energy. It is in these notes that I tell you part of my story. Sarutobi, so that you may know what I am a gargoyle offspring. I die after a near half of a millennia of wandering and recasting a youth spell my parents taught me. Upon the attack of the Kyuubi, who now comes towards us to wreak carnage on our village, I have decided to end my own journey. Uzumaki Kushina was the only one to see me as myself and not run at first sight of my birthright. Now that she has passed, I cannot live on. Such is another curse of a gargoyle. Even for a half-breed, we become fully attached to those we mate with. Do not worry for Naruto. I have left a seal on him that will hide my genetic side, costing him a good portion of his growth. This seal needs to be replaced in 16 years with extreme care, or he will revert to his gargoyle state at nightfall. Should he revert to this state, relinquish the scroll into his care. Do not reveal this lair to Jiraiya-sensei until the seal is to be reinforced, or until after it isn't reinforced and the change has occurred. Knowing you though, you probably will reinforce it. I entrust this decision to you and you alone. Sarutobi, Arashi. My true name. The Yondaime Hokage. A letter hastily written by the Yondaime Hokage that sits in the Sandames. Here is in Sarutobi. Special note starts this scroll. It was the day of the 16th year celebration of the birth of the Yondaime's son. It would only be a few moments until the dark-haired apprentice to the Godime Hokage would find this scroll while taking an inventory of the previous Hokage's scrolls, read its contents out of curiosity because it didn't belong there, and then rush off to find the Godime herself in order to alert her to this new discovery. All hail Uzumaki Naruto, hero of Konohagakure, a villager cried as the 16-year-old Naruto walked into his favorite ramen bar. The blonde still wore his orange and black jumpsuit that Jiraiya had given him, and his hair had grown slightly. He also wore the same cloak similar to his father's, the main difference being his was red with black trimmings, and the toad summoning scroll was still hanging over his body with a strap. Naruto sheepishly scratched the back of his head. It was almost a month ago that pain had attacked Konoha. The village was still being rebuilt and Tsunade had managed to wake from her coma only a few days after the attack was over, though thousands were still lost as to how they were returned to life. Naruto explained what happened with the help of Konan, a former follower of Pain. It was after that battle with a fellow student of Jiraiya of the Sannin that Naruto started to gain the attention he wanted from the people of Konoha. Now that he had it though, he seriously was rethinking that whole desire for attention. Acknowledging his existence was one thing, kissing his ass and the steps he took was another thing entirely. Makes me wonder why Sasuke left in the first place, Naruto thought sarcastically. He sat down in his usual spot of the Ichiraku's ramen bar. He smiled at the brown-haired girl that stood before him, waiting to take his lunch order. What can I do for you, Naruto-kun? Ayame asked as she leaned on the counter across from him. Naruto grinned his signature foxy grin at her. A bowl of pork ramen to start, Ayame-chan. The blonde replied. Ayame smiled as her father called, I've got it, it'll be ready in a jiff. Before she returned her attention to the blonde, Ayame interlocked her hands and rested her head on them as she looked at the boy. So what are you doing today, Naruto? Naruto arched a brow confused. Why do today? What can be done tomorrow? Ayame giggled and shoved him lightly as he quoted one of the toads he had been studying under. The ramen waitress shook her head and sighed in a feigned exasperated manner. Forgetting your own birthday. Shame on you. Uzumaki Naruto. The young toad sage blinked before raising his fingers and counting them himself. When realization hit him that she was right, the blonde slammed his head into the stand's wooden table. A mutter of, I am such an idiot came from the blonde. He looked back up with a sheepish grin at the ramen waitress. I completely forgot about it. I don't know what I am going to do for my birthday. Well, that's kind of sad now, isn't it, Dickless? A voice said from behind the blonde. Naruto scowled and swiveled around in his chair to look at a completely pale boy with black hair, closed eyes and obviously fake smile. No one asked you. Sigh, Naruto muttered. unseen to most, but noticed by Sai. The blonde's eyes flashed an eerie white before returning to the normal blue that they were. The root agent took a semi-centimeter step back in alarm at the action. Sure, he had seen the red flash before, had been on the blonde's team for a while now, but to see such a completely different color was slightly frightening. Recomposing himself, Sai stood straight once again before speaking with a nod, noted Dickless. Sighing in defeat, Naruto swiveled back around to rest his head in his crossed arms as he waited for his food. Sai watched with amusement, without showing any visibly of course, before taking a seat next to the blonde. Pausing a moment, Sai patted his friend's shoulder, making the Jinchuriki look up with an arched brow. "It's not so bad," Sai said, "at least you know when yours is." Naruto frowned before grinning once again. "Hey, yeah, thanks Sai." "Anytime, Dickless," Sai replied in a sincere manner. Ayame turned away, slightly disturbed by the root's words while her father snickered at the twitch in his favorite customer's eye. Tucci placed the bowl in front of the blonde, hoping to ease the bruised ego of the teenage boy. Naruto fought the urge to strangle him and looked eagerly towards the bowl of ramen that was placed before him. With a watering mouth, Naruto began devouring the bowl before him. Sai watched on with interest as Tucci sighed and went back to his pot in order to make more, grumbling, "Can't even savor the flavor." After his meal, which consisted of 14 bowls of miso ramen and 10 of pork ramen, Naruto went along with Sai went to the Hokage's office in order to see if they could get a lead on where the missing member of Team 7 was. Sai was sketching in his sketchpad as they walked, Naruto occasionally looking over to see what the boy was doing. It turned out to be a picture of Yamanaka Ino's face, making Naruto smirk slightly. He might not be the sharpest kunai in the set, but he could see when someone liked someone else, unless that person was him, as Hinata can atone to. "Sai, that's the 4th time I've caught you drawing her face," the blonde commented. Sai paused in mid-stroke of his pencil and sighed in a lost tone. "I know," the artist said before he continued, "but whenever I am not in battle, I cannot sketch anything else but her. Am I sick?" Naruto chuckled. "Nah, I don't think you're sick. I do think you have a small crush though." Sai blinked before turning to the blonde and said, "But I do not stalk her." "What's that supposed to mean?" Naruto asked with an arched brow. Sai paused in his step and looked over his shoulder to see a pale-eyed girl hiding behind a telephone pole. Naruto followed his friend's gaze, making eye contact with the girl in question. Hyuga Hinata, a main branch member of the Hyuga clan, stood behind a telephone pole, peeking around the object she hid behind and releasing a small squeak when she reached Naruto's eyes. The blonde sighed and looked at the ground as he scratched his head while Sai looked back at him expressionlessly. "Okay, but that's a bad example," Naruto muttered as his hand moved to the back of his neck and he glanced back at the pale-eyed girl, only for her to squeak again and duck behind her pole. The blonde looked back at Sai and said, "What I mean is, like Hinata, you might like Ino more than just the feeling of friendship." "Ah, so I consider her a sister, then?" Sai asked. "I've only felt like this before with my—" No, Naruto said, shaking his hand and paling. "No, don't think like that. That's like me saying I have the hots for Yame-chan back there. What I mean is I think you have romantic feelings for Ino." Sai blinked a few times before realization hit him. "Oh, what should I do?" "Totally asking the wrong guy for that," Naruto muttered, sneaking one last glance at the hidden Hinata, before he turned and resumed his walk. Sai remained quiet as he jogged back up to his friend's side. "I take it you are still lost over Hinata-san's declaration of love for you," the artist said as he resumed sketching his now understandable image. The blonde sighed again. Something had been doing a lot since the battle with Pain. "That is an understatement," Naruto said under his breath. Sai heard it all the same, deciding to remain quiet as the blonde spoke again. "But, I don't know, what would you do? Don't answer that. I need to talk to Kakashi-sensei later. This whole thing makes my head spin." "Indeed," Sai muttered as he paused and brought his pen up to his mouth in thought. After a moment of walking in silence, Sai spoke again. "Should I try and draw Ino-san in a bathing suit?" Naruto's instant face plant to the dirt road was his only reply. This can't be possible," Tsunade said with wide eyes as she read the note in her hand. Shizune nodded as her sensei read and reread the first paragraphs of the scroll. "It is," the black-haired apprentice said solemnly, "and with Jiraiya-sama gone. There is no one to reinforce the scroll," Tsunade muttered. She dropped the scroll to the side and put her head in her hands. "What am I to do? Do I inform Naruto his whole world is going to be flipped upside down, or do I pray this is a joke? The latter would definitely be the worst decision, but if I do let this change happen, the council might try and take action against Naruto, unless—" "Shizune, get me a blank law document," Tsunade barked, sitting up in her chair as the new idea ran freely through her mind. Confused, Shizune did as her sensei instructed. As she handed said blank document to the suddenly energized Hokage, a stray thought of wonder ran through her mind. What could Tsunade-senpai be so energized over? Does she have an idea? Shizune wondered as Tsunade scribbled furiously across the document. Tsunade finished writing and reread her work aloud. I, Senju Tsunade, Godime Hokage, hereby state that all clan heads are immune to the law of Konohagakure, unless they attempt to use their status to seize more power than within their boundaries. Clan heads are not immune to the charge of treason or anything that could prove to be harmful to the village's people. Not so bad if I say so myself. Now, give me a clan starting document. And have someone fetch that baka of a gaki. Again, Shizune got her sensei a document that she asked for. After hearing what Tsunade had written, the understanding came to the medic nin's mind. She watched with silent awe as Tsunade willingly started writing out Naruto's new clan head status. TT Tsunade-senpai, Shizune said after a moment of silence while she watched her sensei work. Why make Naruto-kun? Why make him a clan head? He is 16 years of age today, Shizune, Tsunade said as she wrote out some normal clan laws, and being that age, he can represent himself on the council. This being said, Naruto also succumbs to the clan reinstatement restoration laws, much to my dismay. Now go get him. Shizune nodded and went for the door. Before she could grab the handle, the doors flew open revealing the blonde and his artistic friend. Naruto gave Shizune his trademark grin and Sai gave her a respectful nod of his head while he flipped his sketchbook shut and resealed it into his arm. Good morning, Shizune Nichan, Naruto said with a grin before he dodged an incoming paperweight that came flying at him. With a playful frown, the blonde looked back at the medic and said, Geez, you couldn't let her have her sake? She seems awfully more irritable than normal. Oh wow, Gaki, I didn't know you even knew that word, Tsunade said with a smirk as she put her pen down and rested her chin on her hands. Naruto smirked back at the Hokage with a glint of evil in his eye. I am only looking out for your best interests, Tsunade-ban, the blonde said before he dodged the incoming stapler. He stood and grinned. Huh? Ya missed me oof. He was then hit with a large and heavy scroll, sending him bowling backwards. Naruto groaned as he looked down at the scroll. It was blotched except for its first few paragraphs and he looked back at the Godem in confusion. Hey, Ban, what's this? He asked. Tsunade's and Shizune's eyes widened as Naruto looked back down at the scroll and began reading the first paragraph. Before they could stop him, he had already made it to the end of the passage. His breathing stopped and his eyes teared up as his heartbeat slowly came to a stop. He had met his father, or the Yondaime at least, and was immensely proud to read his father's opening words and to know he was cursed with something other than the Kyuubi within him. It scared him. He's going into shock, Shizune said before Naruto's world went dark and he felt an immense amount of peace. Mindscape, Naruto blinked as he awoke in his sewer of a mind. He stood and ignored the snoozing beast that was behind the cage held together by a small paper seal. Kyuubi seemed to be shrinking, but it could have been a deception of Naruto's eyes. The blonde turned away and walked from the cage, towards another smaller cage that rested on the opposite side, kneeling down to where the small slip of paper was on the bottom of the cage. Naruto examined it. It was similar to that of the Kyuubi's seal, less complex however. A sudden cough came to the blonde's attention and he looked up. Who are you? A shadowed figure asked in a growl. It stood almost a foot and a half taller than Naruto and had glowing white eyes. Naruto stood and looked into the cage. I am Uzumaki Naruto, son of Uzumaki Kushina and Namikaze Minato, the Yondaime Hokage, he replied. The blonde tilted his head slightly and tried to peer into the cage. The figure's eyes narrowed and a hand shot out, closing around the blonde's neck. Puny human, that's all you are, the figure said. Naruto made no attempt to struggle. He looked down at the arm to see it was a light scarlet color. There were 4 fingers around his throat, each being clawed at the end, and the skin felt hard, like that of stone. The figure moved closer to the cage bars, revealing a face Naruto was all but familiar with. His own, aside from some odd protrusions from the forehead, the enlarged fangs, and the more detailed whisker marks, it was an exact replica. But you were useful to me, Naruto, the figure said after a moment to steady Naruto. Releasing his hand, the figure smirked, revealing sharp fangs, before continuing. You are the representative of the human blood within us. And you are the gargoyle, human Naruto said in understanding. What was it like to slumber for 16 years? Why not ask old Snarl and Growl over there? The gargoyle Naruto asked as he leaned against the cage and nodded towards the sleeping Kyuubi. He sure likes to ignore you at the proper moments. Do you know anything about Arashi? Human Naruto asked, changing the subject. Gargoyle Naruto blinked before snorting in amusement. Our father, the gargoyle said as he closed his eyes to think. It was his birth name I believe, or so the dreams have told me. Dreams? Human Naruto asked. Gargoyle Naruto nodded. Dreams, or maybe, dream, he said in a mystic manner. I slowly learned all that our father knew about shinobi and gargoyle abilities. His mix of the two were only in the testing stages before we were consummated. You realize tonight is the last night of my imprisonment? I do, human Naruto said with a nod. I also welcome it, despite having another secret hidden from me come around at the oddest time. What happens to us tonight, brother? What do you mean? Gargoyle Naruto asked. We merge. What else? Finally, our potential will come fully available to us. Human Naruto paused before smiling. I can't wait, brother. Tell me, were you stoned while you slept? Gargoyle Naruto grinned once again, curious about the missing life. Brother? I was indeed. I doubt it will happen once we unite, as it never happened for father. Tell me though, did the old monkey tell you? Old monkey? Human Naruto repeated before it dawned on him and a frown appeared. Sarutobi Gigi. No, he did not. He was killed by Orochimaru. Gargoyle Naruto scowled and spat at the side. Father never once trusted him, said he smelled too much of a snake. A shame about the old monkey, he seemed decent from father's memories. Why do you use the loose term? Human asked. Why not call him Tucson? Gargoyle Naruto chuckled and reached out to pat his other half on the cheek. I have been thinking in the Westerners' ways, so I speak like them. Surely you remember from your travels? Human Naruto nodded. I do. I always thought it odd, but then again, I did come into this realm often to speak to the old fox Teme over there. Odd that I noticed your cage and yet never approached it. Might have been a failsafe father included, Gargoyle said. He was rather gifted in sealing. It was a lot like magic. Spells are going to be difficult to use though, so I hope your ninjutsu is above par. I guess we shall see, human Naruto said, gesturing to the fallen seal that laid at his feet. It then dissolved in a non-existent wind, with a step back and small effort on both of the Naruto's parts. The cage withholding the gargoyle blood of Uzumaki Naruto creaked open. The other occupant of the mindscape winced and awoke from the creak of the rusted cage opening. Boy, what are you? What in the name of Kami is that? Kyuubi asked with wide eyes as the gargoyle Naruto stepped forward. With a grin on both Naruto's faces, they looked at the Kyuubi. You're gonna love this, they said simultaneously. The two then faced each other and raised their hands before pressing them against each other. A bright light emerged from the connecting of their palms, causing the Biju to widen its eyes in shock. By Kami, what sort of creature are you, boy? Kyuubi said in astonishment. Reality. 5 hours later, his heart rate has finally returned, a medic said to the worried shinobi gathered in the waiting room of the hospital. Tsunade-sama and Shizune-san have deemed visitations okay. Please be quiet though. The last sentence was directed at Rock Lee and Maeda Guy, both of whom were immensely silent. Sakura was trying to soothe Hinata's worries. Ever since the girl gathered the courage to admit her feelings. On the battlefield no less, Ino and Sakura took it upon themselves to help her gain Naruto's love. Kakashi leaned against the wall, reading his Icha-Icha, while occasionally glancing over at his nervous students. Sakura was hiding her worry well, but Sai was obviously troubled. Sai seemed to be trying to sketch something but always managed to tear the page out, crumple it up, and start again. It worried Kakashi, but only slightly, and he looked over at the other four in the waiting room. Yamato was out on a mission with Neji, Ten, Ino and the other two members of Team 8. Shikamaru and Choji were to the right Team 8's 3-month pregnant sensei. Yuhi Kurenai, who had been impregnated by their late sensei. Sarutobi Asuma. Shikamaru was in his thinking state and fighting the urge not to smoke, as he had picked the habit up after witnessing the death of his sensei. Choji was also deep in thought with his arms crossed, another new development ever since Asuma had passed. Kurenai was a mess, not because she personally was scared for Naruto, she knew he would be fine, but her hormones had increased her fear and she was sobbing when she heard of the comatose state her surrogate daughter's crush was in. Mitarashi Anko was at her side, trying to soothe her as well as she could without getting snapped at. I'll go in first, Kakashi said before glancing out the window, and then Sakura and Hinata can go in. The sun is going down so I think it'd be best that we leave as soon as possible so he can rest. The others nodded and as Kakashi put his book away while he pushed himself off the wall, an alarm started wailing from the outside of Naruto's room. Shizune's voice came from the intercom of the waiting room. I need Maeda Guy, Hatake Kakashi, and Rock Lee in here now, she said as crackling came from the background. A yelp came from the medic and the three, along with a few more than necessary, followed the medic as he ran back to Naruto's room. Upon opening the door, the shinobi were granted with one of the most amazing sights they had ever seen. In the bed, lied Naruto, turning to stone. His eyes were shut and stone slowly encased him. Starting from his feet up, he was strapped to the bed, and Tsunade and Shizune were doing the best they could to stop the stone where it was. Work harder, Shizune. Something must be wrong. Tsunade barked as her hands glowed an even brighter green. Shizune was sweating from the forehead and instantly Kakashi knew what he, Guy, and Choji were called for. Break him out, Kakashi shouted. Guy and Lee leapt into action, as best they could from the crammed doorway. The two rose their legs to deliver shattering axe kicks when a chakra pulse sent them along with Shizune and Tsunade skidding back. The windows of the room shattered and everyone covered their heads with their arms. When the pulse ended, everyone looked to see a horrible things they would ever witness. Naruto had been completely encased in stone. Tsunade stared in disbelief before slowly approaching the stone Naruto. She collapsed to her knees and reached to touch his face. Hoping to feel skin and break the genjutsu, only to come into contact with stone, she released a cry of agony and Shizune, Guy and Lee all had to restrain her before she ran off and did something stupid. Tears trailed down almost everyone's eyes as the sun set. With the last rays of the sun dimming, the heavy air that was in the room started to drop. Kakashi looked down with a sad eye at his knuckle-headed pupil and looked out the now open window to see the sun vanish from sight. It was then that a crackling sound came from the bed. Kakashi looked on in awe as cracks started to form on the body of his petrified student. Everyone, Kakashi said, gaining their attention, look. Light started to appear on the cracks and the statue's eyes opened. They were glowing a bright white before the cracks increased and Kakashi took a step back, pulling the kunai out in defense. A growl started to emerge from the stone before it shattered, sending fragments of stone everywhere and causing everyone to cover their eyes once again. A roar echoed throughout the hospital and most of the village, causing those close by to cover their ears and huddle together in fear. Kakashi and the others looked to see a shocking sight. Naruto had changed. No longer was he dressed in the clothes he was in before, and his hair had grown slightly. His muscle was visible and seemed to be, as bad a pun as it is, rock hard underneath the scarlet skin. That was the most visible change to the blonde. Kakashi stared in wonder at his student, or he prayed it was still his student. As he looked the boy over as Naruto sat up, his skin had lost all baby fat and he was now only clad in torn orange pants. As stated before, the blonde's skin was now scarlet and easily revealed his muscle tone as it gave off a stone-like complexion. The most shocking changes were on his head, hands, and feet. He now had 4 horns protruding from his forehead and pushing his longer blonde hair back. The hair on his eyebrows had vanished and were replaced with a ridge. His whisker marks had become more defined and as he yawned and stretched, his newly lengthened fangs were visible to all. His hands had become talon-like, losing their human features such as his fingernails. His feet were the most changed, becoming high and arched, losing 2 toes and becoming 3 large talons on the front with a 4th protrusion at the heel of his foot. The next shocking sight came all too fast for the witnesses and caused Hinata and Sakura to faint. As he stretched his arms, Naruto spread 2 large hooked bat wings. They were easily 15 feet in length from wingtip to wingtip. Naruto blinked a few times before his eyes became focused and looked down at his hands. He stood and winced, shocking everyone as he stood a full 7.5 feet tall on the balls of his feet. Before he reached behind his back and tore his pants, making room for something to slide through the new tear. A long scarlet tail with a 3-prong tip to slide out. The blonde looked around at everyone. Is there some stone on my face? He asked, turning to look at a cracked glass door that held spare items for patients. Everyone conscious sweat dropped. "En Naruto?" Kakashi asked as he stared at the beastly form of his student. The others had slowly filed into the room and stared in awe at the blonde's new form. Naruto turned back to them and grinned, once again showing off his elongated fangs. "Yo sensei," the blonde said with a wave as his wings folded casually over his shoulders, forming a cloak-like shape. "What do ya think? Is it me? Be honest now. What the hell happened to you?" The members of the Rookie 12 that were present and conscious shouted at once. Naruto took a step back in caution before chuckling nervously and scratching the back of his head with his right hand. "Right," Naruto drawled out as he moved his hand back to his side. "Well, how'd I put this? Ah yes, my father, the Yondaime Hokage." "The Yondaime Hokage didn't have any children," Enko shouted. Naruto arched an eye ridge and crossed his arms. "Oh really, Ms. Know-it-all? Enlighten me, then," the blonde said. "Who do I look like, when I am human that is?" Enko raised her finger and opened her mouth to speak when her brain short-circuited. She then realized he was right and turned to the doorway wall, subtly as she could. The snake mistress then began to bang her head against the wall. "Stupid, stupid, stupid, stupid," Enko muttered to herself. The blonde gargoyle chuckled and shook his head. "It's okay, Mitarashi-san," Naruto said with a smile. "I understand. I mean, everyone else in the village obviously couldn't see it. Hell, I didn't see it until I went into limbo." "You what?" Tsunade shouted. She along with Shizune were now giving Naruto worried looks and were probably ready to leap into another round of medical exams. "Ma, I am fine," Naruto said, waving them off nonchalantly. "But anyway, my father was a half-breed, so I guess I am more or less 1/3 gargoyle. Wait. As the blonde started to do the calculations in his head along with muttering to himself and counting on his fingers, the witnesses of the event were all at a loss and sweat dropped. Is he seriously that stupid? The group thought. Naruto groaned and held his head. This would be easier if it wasn't math. I hate math, the blonde grumbled before his eyes flashed white and he spoke in a monotonic manner. My blood type is C positive, a rare blood type exclusive only to gargoyle, demi-gargoyles, or descendants of gargoyles. I have roughly 25% of gargoyle blood now flowing through me, overriding my previous AB positive blood type, thus making me 1/4 gargoyle. As soon as the glow started it stopped and the blonde sat down as his head spun from the new information. Kakashi was wide-eyed as were Tsunade and Shizune, the medical genius that she was. Shizune had a pad open and was already writing that tidbit of information down. Tsunade had stood and turned to the people in the doorway and made a snap decision. Get out! Tsunade barked at them. I want only Kakashi, Sai, and Shikamaru to stay. The reason being they're the only ones of proper knowledge to be in the room and that I said so get. Shoji and Lee sighed before respectively crouching down to pick Hinata and Sakura up. Enko begrudgingly moved away from the wall and walked away with Kurenai and Guy, the latter proclaiming aloud, Naruto shall be fine because his flames of youth burn fiercely. Naruto's left eye twitched in a disturbed manner before he shook it off. He looked around the room, his eyes landing finally on Shikamaru. He shut his eyes for a moment, everyone noticing the glow they took on before they shut, but when he reopened them they were still the blue orbs he always had. Cocking his head slightly, Naruto held his hand out and said, Pass me a smoke, Shika. Shizune and Tsunade both gaped while Shikamaru shrugged and pulled a cigarette out from his pocket. He tossed it to the blonde, only for it to be intercepted by Kakashi. Naruto growled at the interference and stood, glaring down at the man he was easily a foot taller than. Give it, Naruto said, his eyes narrowing. I am stressed, tired, and not in the mood, sensei. They aren't good for you Naruto, Kakashi said with an eye smile. As he went to crush it in his hand, the tail of the blonde flew up and slapped Kakashi's hand. Making the Jonin release the cigarette, Naruto caught it in his outstretched hand before lifting it to his mouth and placing it there. He then held his right hand up as his eyes glowed again and his fingers turned into stone. Naruto snapped them together, making a small fire and lighting the death stick with it. He shook his hand once the cigarette was lit, ridding the stone from his body and the fire from his fingers. What the hell, Gaki? Tsunade roared. She stormed over to the gargoyle and reached for the cigarette only for Naruto to suddenly jerk his head back. He narrowed his eyes down at her and put the cigarette between his pointer and middle finger, removing it from his mouth. Look, Bachan, Naruto said as he exhaled the smoke to the side, I don't know how I know this, but toxins can't kill me, A. My blood won't be affected by normal toxins that affect humans and B. I still have the Baka Fox chakra to keep me clean. Tsunade and Naruto held a stern glare before the Hokage turned and sat in a chair rubbing her temples. The Godime groaned and muttered something about needing a drink, which caused Naruto to laugh due to his advanced hearing. Shikamaru had first snapped from his daze and lit a cigarette before looking at the blonde gargoyle and asking, so what is this? A side effect to the Kyuubi. Naruto chuckled and placed the cigarette back in his mouth. Close, it comes from my father's side of the family. He wrote a scroll warning Gigi about my birthright. This is what was thrown at you, yes? Sai asked as he lifted the scroll from its spot on a chair. Naruto nodded and held his left hand out for the scroll. Sai handed the small scroll to the blonde before taking a seat in the chair it once occupied. Naruto unrolled the scroll and nodded. I knew it, he muttered before turning the scroll around to face everyone else. Kakashi's eye bulged, Shizune's jaw dropped, Tsunade mimicked her student, and Shikamaru muttered his catchphrase. Sai showed no surprise, aside from the slight opening of his eyes. Naruto grinned before turning the scroll around once again. That cheeky bastard, this is my clan's past, my Gargoyle clan's history. Apparently I descended from the third clan leader that was recorded in time, Bru clan and his mate Katana. This Galician stuff is hard to decipher. What's Galician? Kakashi asked with a confused eye. Naruto grinned at his sensei. I thought you knew everything, Kakashi-sensei, the blonde said cheekily before turning serious. My clan is from the western lands, and Galician was their original language. It says here that my great-great-grandfather, Bru clan, had 2 children, Nashville and Taichi, apparently. Taichi is my great-grandmother. Apparently it was almost 750,000 years ago when Bru clan Gigi took command of the then-named Manhattan clan. Odd name, before he had participated in a war against mankind. This is what killed off most of the planet and mutated the children of the survivors, giving birth to Kekkei Genkei. Dad was raised in a bunker by a woman named Demon. She was killed about 250,000 years ago by some guy named Macbeef, funny name, leaving Dad alone for the rest of his time on the planet.
It seems Dad couldn't bring himself to take more than one mate.
Some immoral code for gargoyles? Shikamaru asked with an arched brow as he took a puff of his cigarette. Naruto shook his head and flicked his wrist, rolling the scroll up. Gargoyles are instinctual creatures, Naruto said. I'll explain how I know this later, but they usually only take one mate, unless the time is dire. After the war with humans that lasted a good 250,000 years before my father was born, humans and gargoyles started pairing off. Who knows? Perhaps there is a clan out there that had descended from gargoyles, but that doesn't matter to me now.
What does? Shizune asked. Kakashi, Shikamaru and Tsunade all turned at her before looking back at Naruto, who had turned away to look out at the village from the broken mirror. The reaction of the village, Sai said, earning everyone's attention. It wasn't long ago that they saw him as the demon and not the jailer. People's opinions change in a snap of their fingers. We have to address this immediately or the reaction could be worse.
You aren't the one to decide that, Sai, Tsunade said. Naruto turned towards the Godem with saddened eyes. He's right, Ba-chan, the blonde gargoyle said quietly. I have to show them what I am lest we start a civil war. Please call for a village announcement. You can't boss the Hokage around Naruto, Kakashi said with Shikamaru nodding slightly. Naruto glanced at his sensei before speaking calmly. I am not ordering her to, sensei, the blonde said before looking over the village from his window again. I am asking her to.
Geez, to think the Hokage would call for a meeting this late, whispered a council trainee by the name of Inuzuka Hana before she yawned. She was taking her mother's spot while Sume and Kuromaru healed from the pain invasion. Hana continued after her yawn. I've got some problems with a first-time mother back home and I don't particularly like leaving her without my watch. Good thing I decided to leave the Chimeras behind. Hyuga Hiyashi chuckled before hiding a small yawn of his own. I agree, Hana-san, but she is the Hokage and her word is law. At least we have seats up front and don't have to stand.
Shikamaru, who had taken his father's spot as clan head during his recovery from the pain invasion, glanced at the Hyuga clan head. Was that a joke, Hiyashi-dono? Might have been. Hiyashi replied with a small smile before it vanished when a cloaked-clad figure walked up behind the Hokage. Who is that?
He, Shikamaru said nodding his head in the cloak figure's direction, is why we are here.
Who is it? Aburame Shibi asked stoically from his spot on Hiyashi's left. My bugs are unnerved and yet calmed by his presence. Hana sniffed in the figure's direction before blinking in confusion. He smells like foxes and stone.
Hiyashi attempted to see past the cloak with his Byakugan, before deactivating it completely. I cannot see his face, his whole body is pulsing with chakra. Should we be worried? Inoichi asked as he watched the cloaked figure bow to them, nodding in return of the stranger's respect. Shikamaru chuckled, earning the attention of his peers. I doubt it, the chain-smoking Nara said, unless the villagers roar for this guy's head, we should be in the clear. The other council members present all watched as the Hokage approached the podium and utilized a voice-enhancing jutsu. Tsunade was clad in her Hokage robes, proving to everyone just how serious she saw this event. I thank you all for joining me at this late time, considering we have all been working hard to return our village to its fullest abilities, Tsunade said in a grateful tone, but I have good news. Upon the 16th anniversary of the imprisonment of the Kyuubi and the birth of our village's hero, a Kekkei Genkei awakened within Uzumaki Naruto. People started whispering excitingly, now fully awake from Tsunade's announcement, and the council were all listening in eagerly and glancing at the cloaked figure. Shikamaru smirked as he pulled a cigarette out and tossed it to the cloaked figure, who caught it in his clawed hand out of sight of the rest of the council. Tsunade smiled at their reactions before turning gravely serious. I must warn you though, she said, getting everyone's attention once again. Like most Kekkei Genkei, Uzumaki-sans has changed his appearance greatly. A scroll was found in the Sandaime Hokage's, my sensei's, hidden safe that revolves around Uzumaki's Kekkei Genkei. Through this we have discovered the effects of his bloodline only happen at sundown. Now, please keep your heads as Uzumaki-san gives you information of his Kekkei Genkei. Tsunade stepped back and motioned to the cloaked Naruto to take a step forward. Naruto bowed slightly in respect before stepping forward and lifting his clawed hands up, earning slight gasps from the villagers. Before dropping his hood, people collectively gasped as Naruto revealed his new face to the people. The council were all also in shock, save for Shikamaru, who was inwardly applauding Naruto for keeping his cool. First of all, Naruto said, revealing his voice had not changed once despite his appearance.
I would like to remind you all the effects of my bloodline last only from sunset to sunrise. Secondly,
I would like to inform you that this is not because of the Kyuubi no Kitsune,
but of the blood of my father, whose identity I have yet to discover.
I wish to tell you all despite my new appearance. I mean you no harm.
It is in my blood, literally, to protect my village.
It is the Uzumaki way of life as well as my Kekkei Genkei's curse, or so the scroll I have read stated. If you all wish, I can reveal the rest of my changes to you, or, he hesitated, knowing his words would likely cause many to call for his head or instantaneously turn him into a nuke nin. Looking back at the Hokage for reassurance, which he got as well as support from her gaze, Naruto looked back over at the gathered shinobi and villagers and said, or I can leave Konoha.
To his shock, there was no uproar or call for his blood. In fact, there was no verbal response louder than hushed whispering. Naruto remained quiet, doing his best not to listen carefully to their words, before a shinobi spoke up from the crowd, "Show us."
He was immediately backed up by others in the crowd and Naruto smiled slightly. The blonde bowed his head slightly before lifting his clawed hand to a strap on his shoulder, slicing through the fabric easily with his claws. The blonde let his cloak drop and stood to his full height on his arched feet. Again, people gasped and whispered amongst themselves, much to Naruto's surprise. Seeing that he was beyond the point of no return, Naruto played his biggest card and unwound his tail from his leg, slipping it through the slit in his pants, as well as uncloaking his wings from his body. People whispered their shock while others, mainly children, oohed and ahhed. A few catcalls even shot out from the crowd, the blonde's age earning a blush from the scarlet-skinned Gargoyle. Scratching the back of his head, Naruto said, I take it you all are okay with this.
A unanimous cheer came from the crowd, again making the blonde blush before he looked back at the Hokage who smiled and nodded. Naruto turned back to the crowd and cloaked his wings once again before stepping back, allowing Tsunade to take her place back at the podium. The Godem smiled at the villagers, despite a few shrinking away in fear from the Hokage and her own personal demon, and said, "You have all chosen well, which is why I give Uzumaki Naruto the title of clan head and call for a public shinobi council vote to make him my successor. As Senju clan head, I support my movement, obviously."
A few councilors gasped before the civilians started to sweat in their seats. Some weren't even full supporters of the blonde, despite his status as a village hero. One such person was Shimura Danzo, who was scowling deeply from his seat as he contemplated his next move to become Hokage. Shikamaru stood and spoke into the podium before his seat. The Nara clan accepts the Godaime's movement to make Uzumaki Naruto our Rokudaime Hokage, despite his troublesome antics. The Yamanaka clan accepts the Godaime's movement as well, Inoichi said, recalling Naruto's decision to reason with pain being successful. The Akamichi clan accepts the movement, Akamichi Chozu said from his spot. The Aburame find this to be an illogical move on the Godaime's part, Aburame Shibi said, earning a scowl from Tsunade, and thus decline.
Hana started, suddenly finding herself at a loss before recomposing herself. As the current representative of the Inuzuka clan head, I accept this movement.
As the representative of the Sarutobi clan, I decline this movement, Homura said from his spot, earning boos and jeers from the crowd as well as nasty looks from the group. He liked the boy, to be honest, but Naruto had yet to deal with the same hardships the other Kages had to deal with, as they had all been a part of war. As Hyuga clan head, I have to consider that Uzumaki Naruto has not had yet enough experience as a shinobi to be named a Kage, Hiashi said in a serious tone. Thus as my judgment is sadly in favor of the decline of this movement, I apologize. As Hiashi sat down, the people started to boo and jeer his decision, while a few secretly supported the decline of the demon becoming Hokage. At this Tsunade nodded in understanding before turning back to the crowd. With a sad smile, Tsunade spoke, unfortunately, we need a unanimous vote in order to grant Uzumaki Naruto his right to be Rokudaime Hokage. However, as it states in Konohagakure law written by my grandfather and granduncle along with then Uchiha clan head Madara, a Hokage can choose his successor to be if there is a vote in which the successor was not chosen to be Hokage unanimously or appointed the duty by the Hokage themselves. Using this law, I grant Uzumaki Naruto the position of Rokudaime to be, unless anyone of the Shinobi Council challenges this decision. A unanimous no was the response, gaining loud cheers from the crowd. Naruto smiled slightly and bowed to the Shinobi Council members in respect as well as the civilian council members. Despite his not too pleasant past with them, he was not ready for Tsunade's next statement and thus fainted when the Hokage said, I also name Uzumaki Naruto the next clan head of the Uzumaki clan, and thus, to my personal amusement, also put him in the clan reinstatement act of Konoha, effective in 1 week. Shikamaru laughed at the dazed look in the unconscious blonde Gargoyle's eyes while the crowd burst into conversation. The Nara representative stood and activated his signature Kajimane no Jutsu on the unconscious blonde, having his stand and walking his unconscious body back to his home while many females in the crowd watched and followed the red-skinned being with their eyes. NNG, Naruto groaned as he sat up from his bed. He looked at the clock to see it was still nighttime and thus he would still be a gargoyle. With a glance at his wings, the blonde had an idea hit him. I wonder if I can get that gliding thing down, the blonde thought as he examined his wings as best he could.
With another glance at his bat-like wings, the blonde started to walk towards the door before stopping. He looked down at his hands and then at a window that his sensei constantly used to drop fruits and vegetables off.
Snatching an apple from the basket his sensei left for him that day as he went to the window. Naruto took a large bite from it before opening the window. Hopping onto the ledge outside the window, the blonde twisted himself around and raised his arm and dug his clawed right hand into the side of the wall. With slight effort, the blonde then dug his left hand into the wall above it. Hoisting himself up, he continued to climb up the side of the wall, making use of his newly gained talons. With a grin, the blonde gargoyle started to scale the wall of his apartment complex. Hopping over the edge, Naruto looked around and spread his wings, searching for a current of wind. High winds were rare in Konoha, but not unheard of, especially at night. The Jinchuriki's eyes flashed white as his father's knowledge on gliding came into his mind again, all the details as well as the science behind it. With that knowledge came an idea his father had. Adding his own wind chakra to the area beneath his wings, a gargoyle could achieve flight, not the simple gliding along the wind currents, but flight, something humans of the past had achieved, but was lost to today's shinobi and villagers. As the glow in his eyes died, the blonde grinned and ran towards the edge, already manipulating the elemental chakra within him towards the currents beneath his wings. With a large leap into the sky, Naruto spread his wings and fell. Concentrating on his chakra manipulation, he failed to hear the cry of fright coming from a watching villager. As several Anbu leapt towards the apparent suicidal shinobi, Naruto continued to focus on his manipulation. As he was seconds from becoming a pancake on the ground of Konohagakure. The blonde snapped his eyes open, determination shining within them, before his fall turned into a light glide. With a flap of his wings, wind chakra started to push upwards into the wings of the young blonde gargoyle and he gained altitude. The Anbu rushing to his aid stopped and watched in awe, as well as several villagers and shinobi that were watching. With a grin towards those beneath him, Naruto successfully attempted a barrel roll that he witnessed his father do in his dream.
This is awesome, the blonde cheered as he flew higher into the sky.
A few hours later, the blonde flew towards the town's local shinobi hangouts and landed with a stumble. With a chuckle towards several drunks that were now debating whether they should scream or not, the blonde dusted his torn orange pants off and cloaked his wings over his shoulder. Naruto walked towards a bar, his head ite around his neck, before he was suddenly barreled into. Still new to his feet, the blonde fell back as a smaller human landed on him with a grunt of pain. Ow! The person, a girl from her voice, exclaimed. Naruto blinked the dizziness from falling away and looked up into the face of the Inuzuka heiress Hana, who was rubbing her face. Hana looked down and was prepared to cuss out whatever idiot she ran into, and whacked her nose against something hard, only to look down at the blue eyes of the youngest clan head to date. Scrambling to her feet, Hana apologized. Sorry, Naru heir, Uzumaki-sama. The blonde gargoyle smiled in amusement before standing and looking down at the girl that was easily a foot and a half shorter than himself. Hana swallowed at the head of the Uzumaki clan's height out of nervousness only for him to scratch his head sheepishly and grin. Not your fault, Hana-san. I was lost in my thoughts and didn't even notice you approaching, so the wrong was my own. Where are you off to in such a hurry? Hana stood dumbfounded as the blonde brushed her apology off with his own before blinking out of her stupor. Hana remembered exactly where she was running to before knocking the young gargoyle over and exclaimed, Shit. I've got to go, there's an emergency and I have to get back to the clan grounds.
Naruto arched a brow. Need a lift? Not unless you're faster than me.
Hana said as she started to move around the blonde. A evil glint appeared in the blonde's eye and he grabbed her arm. Before Hana could protest, Naruto scooped her into a bridle hold and broke into a mad dash for the Inuzuka compound. Hana suppressed her anger as she closed her eyes due to the rush of the wind against her face. Naruto was internally dancing with glee as not only had his appearance changed, but his muscles were further developed as well as his mindset. Stopping on a dime outside the compound of the Inuzuka clan, Naruto set an uneasy Hana on the ground, leaving a hand on her back to steady her. Once she had regained her bearings, Hana rushed into the compound. Naruto calmly walked in behind her, getting some growls and confused looks from the present canines. The blonde gargoyle followed the Inuzuka heiress into the newborn's pen where her dogs, the chimeras, were sitting watch over a gray-furred pregnant female. Naruto blinked as he was hit with a barrage of scents. His eyes flashed white again as information imprinted in his mind. She's giving birth. A female dog on the left of the mother to be said. Hurry Hana pup, her pulse is increasing beyond normal. Hana cursed and unsealed an emergency pack of her veterinarian tools. If I am going to save the pups, I am going to have to give her a C-section. Is Kuromaru here? The female dog shook her head. Kuromaru said to save the pups at any cost. If he loses a daughter, he'd rather not risk their lives as well, nor would I. Hana sighed before nodding. It often came to that hard decision for Kuromaru or other males.
Dogs giving birth, especially for the first time, had many difficulties without the proper medical jutsu.
But the difficulties were rare because usually a veterinarian was present. This new mother, however, was one of the few that had difficulties throughout the pregnancy. Her partner, a childhood friend of Hana's, had died in a mission before the pain invasion. A loss of a partner was a hard blow for the Inuzuka dogs. They often sulked around the compound after that, not wanting to do much other than eat and sleep, and rarely took on another companion.
As Hana started to save the puppies, Naruto's eyes were still glowing a bright white.
Earning the attention of the Chimeras, he had immediately deduced the female giving birth had a heart problem.
Something in his instincts were screaming to save the dog. Once Hana finished pulling the newborn pups, stillborn and not out, Naruto acted swiftly. He sliced along his hand with one talon.
The healing ability he had not kicking in as quickly as before. Before placing his hand on the freshly stitched up mother, the female next to the dog growled at him, only to be silenced by a growl and a glare from the gargoyle before he looked back at what he was doing. The blood infused with his chakra was melding slightly with that of the half-dead female dog. Naruto closed his eyes before saying quietly, "Day after day you wish it to end. I free you from your burden as my newborn best friend. To heal the wounds that medics cannot, I give you the gift of no longer needing a shot. As the day ends and the sun goes down, you change with me, becoming as hard as the ground. During the hours of night you shall be like me, becoming the first of the Uzumaki breed. It is this way that you shall heal by tomorrow, born again as the ever-graceful Midorimaru." Before Hana or the other dogs present could ask what he was doing, a bright flash covered both the gargoyle and the dog. When the flash cleared, the gray dog was gone and in her place was an olive-green furred dog. The gargoyle beast was 3 times her original height and had a smooth muzzle and a tail that was similar to Naruto's tail. With a tired whine, she opened her eyes to reveal white orbs without pupils. Naruto smiled, not a toothy grin or one of those he gave to his friends, but one showing care and compassion. Hana watched as Naruto started stroking the now short green fur on the neck of the now healed dog. "There's a good girl," Naruto cooed to the exhausted dog as he stroked the gargoyle beast's fur. "Midorimaru." The once pained dog looked up and lightly licked the chin of the gargoyle blonde that healed her before looking over at her deceased pups with saddened eyes. Naruto followed the dog's gaze before looking at Hana, who he noticed was staring at the two of them. Hana blinked from her stare before asking, "What did you do to her?" "I saved her life," the blonde said before looking at the dead puppies, "but I can do nothing for her offspring. A shame." Hana was still stricken with confusion and awe at the things she had just witnessed. She barely noticed the blonde standing from his kneeling state, the reborn guard dog Midorimaru slowly following his actions. Naruto walked towards the door only to be blocked by the Heimaru trio, who growled threateningly at him. Midorimaru growled back at her kin, her eyes glowing white as she growled. Naruto looked thankfully at the defense of his new friend and companion before looking at the now standing Hana.
"I would like a council with the Inuzuka clan matriarch," Naruto said, shocking Hana. "I can tell she is almost healed enough to resume her own duties as clan head, and I would like to offer her something. It would be best to have this meeting tomorrow. Good day to you, Inuzuka Hana." With that said, the blonde scarlet gargoyle turned on the balls of his feet and led his companion from the Inuzuka clan grounds back to his apartment. He was approached by several other dogs only for them to be given a warning growl from Midorimaru, who was easily larger than even Akamaru, the largest of the Inuzuka dogs. Hana and her own companions watched with wide eyes as Naruto easily scooped the immense dog up and took off into a run before throwing his wings out and taking to the sky, a head nudging the palm of her hand. Hana looked down to see one of her Heimaru looking up at her with worry, smiling slightly despite her doubts. Hana reassured her dog with a smile and said, "I am sure it's nothing of importance, Ashimaru. He probably wants to discuss what he did for Midorimaru." Morning came sooner than the scarlet gargoyle would have expected. Around the earliest hints of lighting, the blonde turned to stone as he and Midorimaru gazed out over the village from atop his father's carved head. On his left, the former Inuzuka dog also turned to stone as she sat next to him. As the first rays of light hit the statues of the two, a small crackling could be heard from both of the statues before ever so slowly they started to chip off, revealing the once again human face of Uzumaki Naruto and the wolf-like one of Midorimaru. The sun was halfway up by the time the two were fully freed from their stone state. Naruto yawned and stretched slightly, popping his back into place, before he rubbed his eyes as though he just woke from a 10-hour nap. Midorimaru was doing her own morning stretches and yawning as though she were in the same situation before she examined herself. Instead of the usual black and gray, she now had a nice clean coat of brown and black as well as a long tail that was slightly bushy. Naruto scratched his side and took a step back, only to step on a fragment of his stone shell, grabbing his foot and hissing in pain. The blonde glared down at the shard that stood straight up in a spike-like manner. Looking back at his foot,
The blonde was not surprised to see the small cut healing up already. With a final yawn, Naruto looked around at the village when a sudden breeze came to his attention. Geez, since when is it so cold up? Oh, that explains it. Naruto thought as a small gust of wind blew through the sizable hole in his trousers left from his tail. The teenage clan head clutched the gap in his pants, unknowingly covering more than he originally thought, and began the quick journey home for a new set of clothes. Midorimaru followed her new master eagerly, wondering why he was clutching his torn pants in such an undignified manner. Naruto hopped over the rooftops of the village when a large white blur barreled into him, knocking him onto the rooftop of a building. Geez, Dobi, you should really watch where you are going. A familiar voice chided to the blonde playfully. Naruto opened his eye to see the duo of Kiba and Akamaru, the former smirking down at him as the latter sat atop his stomach. Naruto dryly laughed at Kiba's attempt at humor. Oh hardy, har, the blonde said as he stood and regained a hold on his pants. Akamaru barked kindly towards the blonde when a brown and black blur tackled the large white dog, throwing the rider from his back and the white dog to its side. Kiba gaped at the size of the dog growling down at his own, his jaw dropping when Naruto spoke. Midorimaru, leave Akamaru alone. Midorimaru growled once more before pushing off of Akamaru, making the slightly smaller dog yelp as she went to her master's side. Naruto scratched her ear affectionately with his free hand and smiled back at Kiba. How'd the mission go, dog breath? He asked. Kiba shook himself from his stupor and looked at the blonde with a grin. It went well. Where'd ya get that dog, Naruto? Kiba asked, his eyes dropping to the fairly large canine next to the blonde. Midorimaru crouched into her growl and Kiba swore her eyes flashed a pure white. No, Naruto sternly commanded, causing the dog to stop her excessive growling. Do not growl at Kiba, Midorimaru. She followed me home from your clan grounds last night. Why were you at my clan grounds? The Inuzuka heir asked suspiciously as Akamaru crouched fearfully behind him from under the light growling of the brown dog standing next to his partner's friend. The white dog didn't know why she smelt of stone instead of the wonderful scent of dogs that most Inuzuka hounds are usually associated with, but it didn't help with his sudden unease towards the strange dog that was strangely familiar. I walked your sister home from the bar, Naruto casually said, not realizing the insinuations that could be implied by that statement until he was hoisted up by the leather jacket-wearing heir. And what were you doing with my sister at the bar? Kiba growled as his eyes narrowed dangerously. He released the blonde when sudden pain engulfed his left leg. The heir cried out and grabbed his leg, which was bleeding, and looked to see the large brown dog growling at him. Her eyes were definitely glowing white as small droplets of blood dropped from her mouth. Midorimaru, Naruto snapped, surprised at the dog's actions before rushing to his friend's aid. You okay, Kiba? Oh man, here, Akamaru, come here. Midorimaru, who slunk back at the command at her master's words, began to stand as Akamaru approached him, only to be met with the glowing glare of the blonde hybrid. You stay, he growled, causing the dog's ears to drop as she whimpered in acknowledgement of her wrong, and he looked at Akamaru with his normally kind blue eyes. Good boy, come on, Kiba, Akamaru will get ya home. Naruto helped his injured friend onto the back of the enormous white dog and redirected them to the boys' clan home. He followed them for a few moments before stopping when Kiba said he'd be fine. He took this time to turn his attention to his ashamed companion. What was that all about? He asked with narrowed eyes as he crossed his arms over his chest. Midorimaru whimpered and approached him cautiously, her ears flat against her head and her tail between her legs. Not surprised by his ability to interpret her whimpers into a language similar to his own, Naruto began scolding her. I don't care what you think you have to do to defend me. Kiba is a friend of mine and you don't attack my friends. Whimper whine. Don't give me that. The blonde snapped. You remember how Inuzuka are, he was only defending his sister. Whine. No, I don't agree with you. Growl whimper. You were wrong in that aspect then. I am not your old companion and I am sure as hell not your master now. I can defend myself. Whimper whine. Oh, well, why didn't you just say that? Naruto asked as he crouched next to the brown dog and began scratching her ear. I am not gonna die anytime soon, Midorimaru. Midorimaru panted in relief and relished in the forgiving affection showed by her moss companion. She corrected herself. The large dog panted happily as the shame she had shown vanished with each wag of her tail. Naruto gave a final pat on her head before he turned towards his apartment's location. All right, I am starting to freeze, he grumbled, crossing his arms over his bare chest before looking down at his companion. Care to give me a lift, Midorimaru? The reply he was given was to be quickly positioned onto her back as she shot between his legs, making it seem as though she was a horse rather than a dog. Naruto chuckled before patting the brown dog on her side. He comically pointed at his apartment before crying, Hi ho Midori-chan, awe. After getting a new set of trousers, and writing a note on his dresser to get some clothes more attuned to his knightly form, Naruto pulled a black shirt on and tied his headband around his arm. Before using his trousers remains to make an orange band with an Uzumaki patch, he conveniently had discovered a small envelope slipped under his door during his night fun with his new companion before tying it around her neck securely. The brown canine wagged her tail happily as soon as the band was around her neck and she barked her appreciation to the blonde. Naruto laughed as he opened the door, snatching a pear in Kakashi's basket, and exited the complex, the large dog following shortly afterwards. Naruto bit into his pear as he walked before looking at Midorimaru and asking, "So, I've never talked to Sume-sama, maybe said hello once or twice, but that's it, what's she like?" Midorimaru made a quiet rumble that translated easily in Naruto's ears as he walked and chewed his snack. His nerves were getting to him and he was still rattled from his earlier encounter with Kiba. Hearing that his friend's mother was just as brash and quick to act nearly made him inhale the pear in his hand. The blonde clan head swallowed the last bit of his pear. Not surprised he ate the stem considering gargoyles and hybrids were capable of eating more destructive things to a normal human's organ system, and mused, this is going to be much more of a hassle than I thought. Come on, Midori-chan, I need to grab a pack of smokes. Naruto and Midorimaru made a quick left into the Dragon's Den, a small chain store for civilian supplies, and he purchased a few packs of cigarettes as well as some dog treats for Midorimaru. What surprised him during this little side trip was the cashier. A girl named Amy kept subtly flirting with him, chalking it up to Tsunade's embarrassing CRA announcement. The blonde hybrid simply kept a smile on his face and gave Amy a good day as he left.
He wasn't surprised to find a small note with the girl's number on it in the bag, stuffing it into his back pocket as he sealed 3 of the 4 packs of cigarettes into a storage scroll, giving Midori a small treat, and opening the other pack and pulling a cigarette out. Naruto stuffed the smokes into his pocket and lifted his hand, cupping the other over it as he turned his fingers to stone. He was unaware of the white flash that came over his eyes, and he clicked them together for a spark. Once his cigarette was lit, the blonde took a nice inhale of the cancerous smoke before exhaling it, releasing a small sigh of relief as he did so. His nerves were settling and his heartbeat slowed. The blonde grinned down at the dog chewing on the small rawhide given to her before he spoke. "All right, let's go meet the alpha." Inuzuka Sume was a strong woman, so it wasn't that surprising to see her sitting at her clan desk in her den. Her trusty partner Kuromaru at her side. Only a few weeks after the attack on Konoha, the one-eyed dog had taken quite the beating during Pain's invasion, as she herself did, and was comfortably snoozing near her leg. Sume was wearing her signature attire, minus the Jonin vest, and had her head-ite tied around her arm. Currently, she was reading through the naming and processing of the Inuzuka pups her daughter had birthed last night. She wasn't smiling as she read it though. "Listen to this, Kuro," Sume growled. Hana-san allowed a blonde beast to change the mother into a green beast. When other dogs approached, the green beast growled before being shushed by the red demon. The red demon is reported to be the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, Uzumaki Naruto, who was reportedly named a clan head earlier that evening. Can you believe that load of crap? Honestly, what jutsu could transfer a bloodline to an outsider? If I may interrupt, a new voice said before Kuromaru could speak, making both alphas look up with surprise to see the blonde mentioned in the report standing before her. An unnerved Hana and a slack-jawed Kiba standing behind him as well as a large dog resembling the mother that was reported to have changed. Naruto continued as soon as he noticed he had their attentions. "It was a spell that allowed Midorimaru to join my clan, not a jutsu, though I am currently using several clones to research more of my clan's bloodlines. It was, in a way, possible." Why you? Care to explain yourself, Uzumaki Dono? Sume asked, her eyes narrowing upon seeing a former Inuzuka dog at the side of another. Kidnapping and brainwashing is a serious crime in Konohagakure no Sado.
"Huh, and here I thought you'd leap up and take a swipe at me," Naruto mumbled before stepping forward, being followed by Midorimaru, and saying, "Yes, I am aware. I am also aware of your clan's bonding laws, or rather, laws concerning debts. Simply put, I saved Midorimaru-chan's life, giving her a second chance where Hana-chan, despite her best efforts, couldn't. In return, Midori-chan has sworn herself and her offspring to assist my clan." "You cannot claim the pups, boy," Kuromaru snarled. Being matched with a warning growl from Midorimaru, the two dogs held glares at each other, and before one could move, Naruto grit his teeth together and blew wind chakra through them, making a high-pitched whistle causing the 5 in the room to clutch their ears or whimper in pain. Naruto stopped quickly as soon as the growling ceased and he looked apologetically at the clan head. "My apologies, in my effort to control Midori-chan, I have harmed you and your kin. I did request a meeting concerning Midori's decision. Kuromaru Dono, if I may call you such. You are, after all, the alpha of the Inuzuka dogs, nay. Kuromaru begrudgingly growled and sat on his haunches. I am, don't do that again, boy, or you'll be missing something important. Again, my apologies, Naruto bowed as he apologized before righting himself. Perhaps we should walk as we talk. Less tension that way, and I'd rather not sit after having such a interesting night. Now I am curious, Tsume muttered before slowly standing. The Inuzuka head and Naruto walked out of the room, their companions walking along opposite sides as the Inuzuka heirs followed them. The elder clan head turned to the blonde and asked, so, how's a brat like you, with no previous background, turn into a clan head?
Search me, the blonde replied with a shrug before he put his hands in his pockets. Got it from my father, whoever he was.
Is that right? Tsume mumbled, eyeing the blonde curiously from the corner of her eyes. And just what is your demonic bloodline anyway? It's a nocturnal bloodline, Naruto replied before looking at his fellow clan head with a grin and flashed his white eyes, but it has its daytime perks, too. Tsume jumped back when the blonde's left fist turned into a stone without so much as a single hand seal. Her eyes were nearly as wide as her children's, considering how they were gaping at the blonde's newfound ability, and she failed to form a coherent sentence as her mouth popped open and shut numerous times. Finally, when her brain had rebooted, the Inuzuka heir grinned in a feral manner. So, a hybrid, I knew it. Knew what? Naruto repeated, his fist cracking before it shattered and a normal hand was in its place. Tsume smirked and shook her head before resuming her walk. It isn't the proper time, the Inuzuka matriarch replied with a smile before glancing over at her companion. Kuromaru had a serious look in his eye and he kept glancing over at Midorimaru, as though he was trying to figure her out, before he locked his eye with Tsume's. Slowly, the canine alpha nodded his head and Tsume's smirk dropped into a friendly smile. To business then, Tsume said, earning the observing blonde's attention. You want to adopt Midorimaru's pups? Yes, Naruto replied with a nod, stopping and placing a hand on the dog's head, making her tail wag as she sat on her haunches. The blonde smiled down at his faithful companion despite only having known her for less than 7 hours before continuing. Already, Midorimaru has done more for me by accepting my bloodline and defending me. The least I could do is fight for her right to be a mother. Tsume smiled as her two kids did as well. Kiba was glad his friend wasn't as thick-headed as he seemed to be, an ironic thought some may have said had they heard him speak his thoughts. The heiress, Inuzuka Hana, however, found her face heating up as she watched an outsider show such compassion to a strange animal. If there was one thing Hana liked in a potential mate, it was loyalty. Hana blinked before blushing. When did I think of him as more than an acquaintance? He's a clan head for Kami's sake. A clan head I hardly know. Fine, Kuromaru said, walking away towards the bunkhouse where they keep newborn pups. Follow me, Uzumaki Dono. Arigato, Kuromaru Dono, the blonde replied with a smile before looking down at Midorimaru. Midori-chan and I are very grateful for this chance. Mind you, boy, if the pups aren't welcoming toward her, I want you both out immediately, the dog growled, making Midorimaru growl her own warning back. Naruto snapped his fingers at her, making her stop, before looking back at the alpha dog of the Inuzuka clan. We understand, thank you again, Kuromaru Dono, the blonde said, nodding his head and showing his respect. The dog nodded and nudged the door open, before stepping in and allowing his companion to enter behind him, and the two Uzumaki members followed. Midorimaru took a whiff of the air and went to her immediate left, sniffing and looking in each pen for her pups. Soft yipping was heard and the large dog hurried her pace before stopping before a door on her right. The brown dog nudged the door open and she walked in, silencing the yips of the newborns in the room. One brave newborn sniffed the air and made its journey over the hay-covered dirt to Midori's feet. Naruto and Tsume watched from the doorway, the latter with a smile and the former with an emotionless face. The blonde was silently praying to whatever deity would listen that the pup would recognize its mother. Midori lightly sniffed the pup that was exploring her feet and lightly licked its head. The pup yipped in protest and continued examining the strange female's paws. After a long tense moment, the pup pushed itself on its hind legs and licked at Midorimaru's leg. Naruto grinned as he stepped into the room while his companion licked her pup and laid down, going to her side as the pups all made their way to get her milk. The blonde knelt at her side and placed his hand on her head, both their eyes turning white, and he spoke. In the light of the day, you shall remain as you appear, but as the moon rises, you'll be like your mother here. As the milk enters your bodies, your strength will grow. This I promise, or my name wouldn't be Naruto. My spell will make all your skills increase, because tonight you will all be the next batch of the Uzumaki beasts. A light covered the room before it died down. Midori's tail lightly swung in happiness as she cared for her pups, and Naruto scratched her ears before looking up at Tsume and an astounded Kuromaru. So, got a cart we can use to get them back to my home. The end. Thanks for watching. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.